That's a carbon fiber paddle. So tough and light. So yeah, feel the weight on that. Yeah, there's not much to it, is there? Yeah, look at that. You can even slam it in a car door and nothing's going to happen to it. Yeah. That's right. I'll send you the bill. There you go. You can feel a good high end. Yeah. So if you've done any paddling, or if you go to Dick's Sporting Goods and you grab something off the shelf, it's very different. Even a few ounces make a lot of difference. When you're yeah. So.
And then, like this song, I went up to DFE, all the way up to, I went up on Memorial Day weekend, out up to Counter Harbor. And what an amazing night. First, it's over right over on the next floor. And it's a huge national forest. It was just me and my bicycle and my kayak. It was one day I spent 14 hours sitting in my kayak. And I couldn't sit down. But I had such a good time. Fishing. Other business going on. Then I drove, when I was driving back, I went up to then followed Lake Superior all the way over to
What time were we officially done? Oh, sweet.
Good evening and welcome everybody. There's so much good conversation going on, and I guarantee that you'll have time to ask some questions, Eric, later. That will hopefully generate even more of that awesome conversation. But my name is Craig Spicer. I'm naturalist here at the Wood County Park District. My specialization is our outdoor adventure programming. So that includes climbing and archery and geocaching and also canoeing and kayaking. I really have loved putting together this series. This is the last talk in our Basecamp Stories speaker series. We started in December, and we've had 6 total speakers, including Eric tonight. And the thing that I've loved about the Basecamp Stories series is it all focuses around the word Basecamp. Even though all of our speakers throughout this series have come from all sorts of different backgrounds. They've pursued different recreational pursuits. They have different expertise, and they've explored their world in different ways. All of them have one thing in common, and that is they call Northwest Ohio their base camp. Northwest Ohio is their home. It is their starting point. It is where all of their adventures start out from. And hopefully, or I imagine that a lot of you are the same way. So I hope that tonight will give you a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of education, hopefully, about the world of kayaking specifically, but then inspire you, hopefully, to take a step during this warm season and get started on your own adventures. Obviously, we don't have to go from ground zero to kayaking Pictured Rocks. There are companies out there that'll help you do that, but here at the Wood County Park District, we have all sorts of programs that can help you get started on your new adventure expertise. And we do have some program guides in the back. It's our spring program guides. If you want to get involved with Wood County Parks programs and get started on, rust busting, maybe some of those adventurous muscles, getting back out there, we can definitely help you with that. But I don't want to steal any more thunder from tonight's speaker. Eric Slough, I have known him for about 5 years. In fact, one of the first times that I met him was he was chauffeuring myself and another friend from Point Place. No, not Point Place.
Catawba.
Catawba.
Yeah, Catawba.
From Catawba over to South Bass Island in my first open water kayaking expedition. And that was one of the first times I met him, so that can tell you right away where his heart is. His heart is with people. He wants to educate other people, make sure that kayaking is as safe as possible for everybody, and also share some amazing adventures that he's gone on. He's paddled all over the Great Lakes region. He's also done tons of whitewater kayaking. He's involved in advocacy groups such as Northwest Ohio River Runners and Toledo River Gang. He's the consummate advocate for kayaking in Northwest Ohio and Great Lakes area. So without further ado, Eric Slough.
All right. Yeah, can everybody hear me? All right, I'm mic'd up now. All right, fantastic. No, I appreciate the accolades there. I consider myself a waterman. If it really involves water, whether it's a sea kayak or a whitewater boat, or even paddleboarding, which is a lot of fun too. But I love what Craig said. As far as the Basecamp series, I cut my teeth here on the Maumee River. I probably paddled 1,000 miles on the Maumee River before I ventured even out into Lake Erie, even some of the local jaunts we have here around Northwest Ohio. When people find out that I do this, a lot of times the first question is, where? And I'm like, there's water everywhere. I mean, we have such a rich resource here, whether it is the Maumee River and some of the other creeks and the rivers that flow into Lake Erie along the northern shore of Ohio here. And then even as a jumping spot, as your interests expand and your skills expand, you start heading north throughout the Great Lakes. And we call this sea kayaking. And I've never been into salt water. I've been in our Great Lakes all over. I've kayaked in every single Great Lake that we have, and I've done some amazing adventures. I've had the opportunity now to do 3 or 4 of these presentations here for the Basecamp series. So I always appreciate coming out and being an advocate for getting out and doing some fun things in the outdoors. I'm definitely an advocate for doing it in a safe and a skilled way. I am an instructor. I think on one of the slides up here it says ACA Level 3 instructor. I am a coastal instructor, and a lot of that just stems from being around people and being able to educate and seeing some things and being able to go out and teach things properly and to be able to go out and have a fun and a very safe experience on the water. I've done some teaching here for Wood County. I've done some teaching for the Toledo Metro Parks as well. Our local club here, the Toledo River Gang, we're actually at the very end stages. We only have one more class of a 10-week class that we do here at the Fort Meigs Y here in Perrysburg. They give you the basic skills that we start in a pool, and then you can expand your skills, whether you want to go on moving water or open water. So doing it safe and doing it efficient is my big stump speech when I'm out there instructing, and it's a lot of fun. At the end of the day, it's a lot of fun doing this. I kind of joke, I have all the gear you can imagine to do this kind of thing, and I've been some amazing places, but I've never backpacked a day in my life. I've camped and hiked and done things out of my boat. I own a couple of really nice backpacks, and I have all the gear, but as you can see, a boat like this is a 16-foot boat, and it's a very efficient boat for plying a lot of miles in an open water coastal setting such as this. So I'm sure most of you have heard of Pictured Rocks. Has anybody been to Pictured Rocks? And if you show of hands there, a lot of times you've seen this looking out over the water, right? Did anybody take the tours? There are some tour boats there that kind of start in Munising. So as you kind of evolve, if you get into this kind of activity, you kind of graduate up to certain things. And Pictured Rocks is probably one of those B+ level trips that you would do in a sea kayak. It is an amazing experience. Even going back through these pictures, the pictures really don't do it justice. I mean, you'll see, I fortunately, I was able to take some good shots on the trip, but just seeing it and experiencing it is just something to be remarkable. It's one of God's greatest things, just seeing the way this shoreline is put together as you paddle along there. As you go up and skill in a trip like this, there are some pocket beaches along the shoreline, but as you see here, even in this picture, there is steep, rocky shoreline. And so it does take a certain skill level to be able to navigate something like this and stay out of harm's way. There's a lot of stories of people where they have gotten in trouble, either whether they don't have the right gear or the right skills on a trip like this. Even some of the tour boats up there have rescued a number of kayakers from some of the rental groups that are up there. So it does take a level of skill to do this, but again, I started down the Maumee River, so I think I've come a long way. So, so I don't know if you want to get into the presentation. Oh, I got this? All right. Oh, check that out. All right, sweet. So, so this is a shot that I took. I mean, this is, one of many shots that look like this. Fairly calm day. As we worked our way along Pictured Rocks at the certain campsites, there is the trail, basically the Pictured Rocks Trail that goes along the top of these cliffs. So you could hike between coves and whatnot and kind of work your way along. So we would usually set up camp, and then we would go and try to find the beautiful vistas and then be able to see out onto the Pictured Rocks. And there are certain things that you can see from shore, which you also can see from water as well. But this picture is just, when I was going through them, was just the perfect shot to represent what kind of terrain you're going to see on Pictured Rocks, and this is from the land, but from the water as well. So Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore, Picture Perfect Trip. This is me, Eric Slough, and ACA Level 3 coastal instructor. So that's kind of where I cut my teeth there. So. Moving along, so the crew on this trip, this is myself, this is my buddy Lee Brothers, and my buddy Kelly McCrate, the guys I've done a lot of trips with. We're all like-minded, good condition, right gear, all the same mindset. I've done a lot of trips with these guys, and it's one of those things that if I get in trouble, I know these guys can help me, and I would do the same for them. And it's just a lot of fun when you have a good group of like-minded individuals going on a trip like this. So Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore. So most people are familiar with Munising. So you have Munising right here, and that's basically where the visitor center is and where you start. And the actual Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore is actually 47 miles up here to Grand Marais. Pictured Rocks itself is only about 15 miles. So it encompasses here from Munising, just up here past Chapel Beach, and then you get over here where it says 12 mile, and it does, it's just 12 miles of beach. So we went up here around this point, we were able to poke around here, and then you can see for miles there's this kind of slopey, kind of sandy beach grass kind of look to Pictured Rocks. There are some steep sand dunes. You kind of get into that same geological feature that is Sleeping Bear Dunes, but it's named 12 Mile Beach for a reason, and I know some people have paddled that, but it's a long way. So our trip, pretty much comprised of doing basically Munising, along Pictured Rocks, and then Grand Island. So Grand Island isn't necessarily part of the Pictured Rock National Lakeshore. It's actually state forest, managed by that. So it's part of our trip, and I would argue for visual sake that Grand Island is almost as cool, if not cooler, than Pictured Rocks. I mean, I'm doing a Pictured Rocks presentation, but they're, along Pictured Rocks, you are sharing some of the campsites with hikers. There's some tour boats, there's some scuba divers, there's a lot of, tourism. The idea of kayaking Pictured Rocks has really taken off in the last 10 or 15 years. So if you go up there now, you're sharing the water with some additional kayaking groups along the water there. So we were fortunate before the really kind of the boom of kayaking to go up there and do this trip, but we were able to include Grand Island as well, and it's a little more remote, a little harder to get to, not as many people, and you're able to do about 40 miles of paddling as you go around that island as well. So we started here just outside of Minnesota. It says Sand Point. That's the point that we put in, and then some of the points that we go along here, you have Miners Castle, then you get up here to Mosquito Beach, Chapel Rock, and then I'm going here, oh, there's the Grand Portal right there. I've got some pictures of, you'll see. And then we did some hiking along here. You have Chapel Lake, and we did some hiking along in here to see some of the sites. And then I'll also make mention of Trout Bay. This is Trout Bay, and over here is Murray Bay. And that's actually kind of a long paddle to get around here, but we incorporated that into our trip as well. And then we worked our way around Grand Island up here to North Beach. And North Beach was a phenomenal experience. It was awesome. I got some great shots of that as well. So the Pictured Rocks Lakeshore and Grand Island together just made for a really nice 6-day trip of on the water and doing some backcountry camping. So it's a lot of fun. So there's the Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore. So getting there, a lot of times people, geographically wise, we're down here, Perrysburg, Toledo area, and straight up through the mitten, crossed it, Sault Ste. Marie, kind of came along the top of Lake Michigan here. The UP, and then right there is Pictured Rocks. So, Google says it's about 6.5 hours. It's almost 7 hours. So it's not a bad trip to get up there. You can boogie up there in a day and be on the water, and that's kind of what we did. We left in the morning and got up there, and we were able to make it to our first campsite all in the same day. So Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore, just some fun facts. So it became officially the Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore in 1966. I found this was kind of interesting too. So it said after the lumbering era ended in 1910, most of the land that made up the lakeshore reverted to the state for unpaid property taxes. So, the companies didn't pay their property taxes, so the state took it back, and were the benefits of that. And then again, Pictured Rocks is about 15 miles of colorful sandstone, and I could probably do 4 pages of just reading information on geology type stuff. I'm not a geologist, but the amazing, the colors and the minerals that are leaching out of the rocks on Pictured Rocks is what gives us its name. So it's amazing when it's dry, but when you get a wet event with water seeping out of the rocks and along the shoreline there, that's where you get the reds and the greens and the blues and the colors that really give it its name of Pictured Rocks. And a lot of the cliffs reach over 200 feet above the lake level. And there are a lot of little pocket beaches, but if it gets rough, it's not a place you want to get out, especially in a sea kayak. But most of it is sheer rock walls. And you can also YouTube some videos of people catching pieces of the face of this rock shearing off and plunging into the lake. And it's pretty impressive, but you don't want to be paddling right along there, and all of a sudden you look up and half the cliff is coming down. So you got to watch your P's and Q's when you do a trip like this. So we did everything ahead of time, and I think they still do it this way too. So we actually had to file our trip plan. And so we actually had to mail this in, and I had to list 3 different itineraries. Because again, they manage the campsites, and you're sharing it with backpackers. So we got a portion of our third trip itinerary. And then at the time, not understanding that Grand Island wasn't part of the whole Pictured Rock Lakeshore, they basically put a note here that said, Grand Island is managed as the U.S. Forest Service, and they you can do wherever the heck you want. So we're like, sweet, cool. So we ended up putting a Sand Point, and they approved us for going to Mosquito Beach, Chapel, and then we went all the way down to Beaver Creek. It's a little creek that comes out there. And it's neat though, whereas you work your way along Pictured Rocks, a lot of these little pocket beaches, there's always some sort of water, stream, or creek that flows out there, and it is kind of nice and sandy, but it's those low areas where the waterways meet the lake. The visitor center is kind of neat. It's just right in Munising. You go in there, you get your permits, you pay for everything, you get all your paperwork approved, and then they send you on your way. So day 1, I always kind of have fun as I do these trips, because going back through the pictures, I'm like, oh, what day was that? So I always kind of chronicle them, and I, put a little 1, 2, 3 as we go through the trip. We made it up there. We didn't have enough room on our car for all 3 kayaks, so Buddy had a little trailer there, and we kind of trailered everything up there. So this is basically the launch point at Sand Point. So obviously it's Sandy for a reason, it's, catches its name there. But we're looking back across from Sand Point on the mainland over to Grand Island, and that's what this picture is here. There's a couple of kids swimming. Now we're talking, we usually do these trips mid to late August. Actually, if you go a little bit later, that's when the water is the warmest, because you're in Lake Superior, and so you're talking, 55 degrees, maybe 60, maybe with the sun, and even that's like the first 6 or 8 inches. You go down below that, and it takes your breath away. So, but the people in the UP are pretty hardy, so yeah, we've got a couple of swimmers there. So, but, we usually get the boats out there. I've got, some bags and whatnot. You'll find is when you get to campsites, you have a lot of little bits and pieces, as you can see you have here. It's always good to have, some bags and things to carry your stuff and load your gear, because usually the campsites, especially when you're on the lakeshore, you have to be so many feet off the water line. Usually it's 300 feet or more off the water line. So you are carrying stuff through sand, especially 100 pounds of gear is not the easiest. So. I bring kind of a hodgepodge of stuff to kind of show you what we bring, and I can go through some of the gear later, but between the dry bags, and you got 100 pounds of gear. Your sleep system pretty much stays the same. Your clothes, depending on the weather, pretty much stay the same. The biggest difference is your food and your water. We pump all of our water. I mean, Lake Superior, we have filters. We pump the water and purify it that way. But once your food bags start going down, you start finding a little more room to stash stuff. But pretty much everything you take, whether you go out for a day or 2 or a week, is pretty much the same. It's just your food and your water is really the biggest difference. So we left the mainland at Sand Point, and we didn't get a campsite along Pictured Rocks on the first day, so we came across the East Channel over to Trout Bay. And so Trout Bay is on the one side of Grand Island. So we were actually on Grand Island multiple times on this trip. So we ended up coming into Trout Bay, and it's another just beautiful remote backcountry, sandy beach sand kind of thing here. There's a little marker there telling you where the campsite is. And so we kind of tucked in off the main beach, kind of back here in the trees, and got our tent set up. And sand is great to sleep on, but if you do any type of camping, sand gets in everything. By the end of the trip, you're like literally you're shaking stuff, and then sand is coming out of places you didn't think you had. You could put sand, but it's convenient in some ways, but other ways, man, it gets everywhere. You take one step, and then all of a sudden there's sand covering everything you got. So we spent our first night at Trout Bay. Now, all along Pictured Rocks and Grand Islands is a very high bear activity. So everywhere we had to hang our food. And it's one of those things that, well, hang your food or stash in your boat. I don't think I want a 500-pound black bear jumping on my kayak looking for a Twinkie. So so we have, we've always brought stuff to be able to throw it up in the tree and kind of get it away, from where you're sleeping, or you don't want to be cooking kind of near where you're sleeping as well. So we had to hang our food, and then. I took so many pictures. We did some hikes with some overlooks. We did do a hike over to Trout Bay, and there's a kind of up on the cliff. And so this is from Trout Bay looking back at Pictured Rocks. So you can see that just these coves and these cliffs just go on and on and on and on forever. So it's kind of neat to get that perspective, being able to look back from the island onto Pictured Rocks. So again, you get the colors of Pictured Rocks. Again, this is, at some point, the shoreline does start to kind of look alike after a while. I was like, where did I take that picture? But getting up close, you can see the reds and the greens and the oranges, and as the water is kind of seeping out through here, just the colors that you get, and you get these bench shelf things. Can you imagine if that wind is coming in through the northwest, what kind of waves are created right there? And that's not a good area to be in, especially with no way to really get out. But it makes for a great photograph. So, but that's just the shoreline you're dealing with when you're talking about sea kayaking and having some of the skills to be able to go along a shoreline like this. So we were crossing back over from Grand Island back over to Pictured Rocks to kind of start our trip. They do have some tour boats here, and then if you look closely, there's some scuba divers. So there's all kinds of wrecks in this East Channel between Grand Island and Pictured Rocks. There's a scuba diver there, and you kind of just make out the outline. And I think I did some research. This was a timber barge, and this timber barge was ginormous. It was like 30, 40, 50 yards wide by 50 yards long, and it's just a big, flat, wide timber barge that they were moving from the logging days. So yeah, this you just kind of hang off the bow of your buddy's boat, and you can kind of go underwater and take a picture and come back up. But I think they were also, there's one tour boat we kind of paddled up to and kind of listened to see what was going on. It's kind of interesting, but I love remote trips. Occasionally you're going to bump into people. For the most part, we didn't see a lot of people, but you do have some tourism activity coming out of Munising. So as we started working our way along the coastline, this is one of the neat features that is pretty well known. It's called Miner's Castle, and this is kind of coming from a distance. And then we hiked over to it, and there are multiple turrets on the castle. And maybe 10 years ago, one of the turrets collapsed, so there's not as many turrets. So it's kind of unfortunate. It's kind of a neat thing to see, but it's just one of those signifying things of Pictured Rocks. But we were happy to see, to have the opportunity to see it, kind of live and in person when we were there. But it's called Castle with the turrets for a reason. So we pull into Miners Beach here, and it's kind of neat. Like I said, every little beach landing area, all this sand was carried by this creek that came down here, and then there's campsites as well. There's a Mosquito River that kind of goes behind the campsites, but you can see these steep rocks until it's not, and then you get a little beach, and so you have a little place to kind of hang out. Miners Beach is an area that I believe there is a parking lot that you can park and hike down to Miners Beach. And it's not that far. Again, we saw it from the water, but I've read some other things that's a place where you can get to kind of hang out for the day if you want. But then if you look, look at this, it just keeps going on and on and on and on, once you leave this beach area. Again, some more shoreline here, and there are caves. As you're paddling the shoreline, you're tucking in and out of these little coves, and you get these caves that are boat length. You can go back into them. You can turn around in some of these caves. Some of them connect to other caves as well. So luckily, when we were going through some of this, we had fairly decent weather, so you weren't getting smashed around in there. But you can paddle in. Some of them took 2 or 3 boats. You can paddle back into them. We got some where you can kind of look up and you can see the top of the cave. But there's just so much to see and do, and you kind of work your way along the shoreline as you're going there. On our deck here, I had a chart case right there, so you are kind of following along. You get your mileage. You kind of know your pace of where you're going. And again, you're constantly monitoring the winds and the waves and looking where you're at to kind of see, where point A, point B is if you have to bail out along the way. So I'm a chart guy. I like charts. GPS is good, but the batteries don't run out in my chart. So I don't know if there's really a name to this feature. I just call it a hole in the rock. And of course, we're paddling along, and we see this ginormous cave sticking out of the side of Pictured Rocks. And we're like, we got to go there. That's awesome. So we just kind of bailed out and swam up to it. And you can kind of climb up this little incline right here and walk back into this cave. And it's deep enough to get back in. Again, I was taking a picture out, and I think it was Kelly. I think it's Kelly right there. But here I'm prepping, and I think the little thing died. Yeah, the battery's dead in the. So, but I find this funny. So I'm not a heights guy. I don't mind heights. I just don't like dying from heights. But for me to go to the pool and jump off the high dive, I have no interest doing that whatsoever. But you go in the backcountry and you're like, wow, there's a ginormous hole in the wall. Let's go jump off of it. And you can be 30 feet in the air. I'm like, that sounds like fun. We're 30 miles away from the nearest med center. Let's go and do that. There's a couple of things I've done. I'm like, in hindsight, that probably wasn't the smartest thing in the world. But, spraining an ankle or twisting an ankle kind of thing. But yeah, again, jumping off a high dive, I got no interest in it, but I'll jump out of a hole in the rock in a heartbeat. That's fun. Let's see. I can advance it, but I don't think oh, there we go. There's back. All right, cool. There you go. The hole in the rock. So yeah, we just kind of hung out. We obviously don't want your boats to float away. So I think it's my turn to kind of hold on to the boats and give someone else a try. But you can kind of see this cathedral. Look at this. It's just this, here's a little hole in the rock. There's another little cave right there. And look at this just carved out, again, kind of cathedral looking, formation in the rock. And it just goes on and on and on. So again, we're getting along to Mosquito Beach, and here's more of the Pictured Rocks shoreline. Again, one of these little carved out cathedral looking kind of shoreline features there. And again, you go on and on. That's the cool thing about it. So Mosquito Beach, you got the river here that comes out. Landed our kayaks here, kind of secure them for the night. And then in this case, we had a pretty steep incline. And they had sort of kind of put like a little log stairway, ladder kind of thing here to make it up from the beach to your campsite. But it was a long way, because you're typically matching up where the hikers are, which is up, further up on the bench. So when you're carrying the gear, you make a few trips, try to make as few trips as possible. But here's just our campsite there. We're all kind of huddled around and had a little stump there for part of our kitchen. So it's always, camp life is always kind of fun, especially if you have a group of individuals that, kind of enjoy the same thing, and conversations that happen, things to just, hanging out. We typically like to cook together as well. I've done trips where you usually do your breakfast and your lunch is kind of on your own, but at dinner time you kind of come together and everybody it's like kind of the stone soup theory. Everybody brings a stone and then you start throwing stuff in. Before you know it, you got a gourmet meal. I usually eat better in the backcountry than I do at home sometimes. So this was kind of behind our campsite. This is the creek that came out, and we did a little hike there. So it's just, even there, I like hiking up the creeks and just kind of seeing what you can see and explore a little bit. Part of the trail that goes along there, there's these little bridges and everything that kind of cross all the little waterways. Here's more of our campsite. Who's the hammock guy? He's the Lord of Lollygag, so hanging out in the hammock there.
Is the hammock for hanging out in the daytime, or people sleep in it?
On this trip, it was just for hanging out. So I've kind of veered this way in my camping, where if you're into, you can do the tent thing or you can do the hammock camping thing, which is another black hole of outdoor gearness kind of thing. I have kind of veered to the hammock camping side of things, and I have enjoyed it tremendously. I'd love to do a presentation just on hammock camping. It's an amazing, into that kind of thing. So I brought it for lollygagging and lazing around. It packs down to about the size of a softball, so it's easy to kind of throw into your kayak and hang out. Comfort factor. I did sleep one night in the hammock, and that's what really kind of sparked my interest in doing actual hammock camping. So yeah, that's not I would say an ideal lay, but it's pretty good. But yeah, it's kind of neat. And then I have this picture here. So that's a typical trail. If you're going to hike this, you want to hike the rim of Pictured Rocks, that's the trail. I mean, that's cutting between campsites, kind of bushwhacking a little bit. You can see the path is kind of well worn, but that's what you're getting from the shoreline. And that's kind of why I like kayaking, because I kind of like my view from a kayak a little bit better than, I've done some hikes where it's just, wall-to-wall trees and, there's not much to see, but that's just a typical trail there. So at this particular campsite, since it is a backpacker's campsite, they actually had a bare pole, and then at the top, there's these little hooks. So you had to bring your line, and you throw it up there, and you got to hook the hook, and then you wrap around your food bags, and you kind of string it up there, and then you kind of tie it off on the pole. But they actually had a bare pole. I've done some trips over in Canada where they'll have a pole like that with a chain and a clip, and you hook your stuff to it, and you wheel the chain up there, and knock on wood, luckily we didn't see any bears on this trip, but you can't be too careful. So stuff like that I kind of find interesting. So we're getting ready to launch. Usually look at the white caps there coming in. That's getting off the beach sometimes is the hardest thing to do, because that's where, just like, most accidents happen close to home, same thing in kayaking. Most accidents happen close to the beach, kind of coming and going. But if you can get out past the breakers and where that dumping surf is and get out into the waves, it is, once you get out past it, it gets a little bit easier, but getting off the beach is tough sometimes. But again, you try to, you got to bring all your gear back. Again, here's the bags, just kind of loading up everything, and you kind of get into the minutia of a trip. And after the first couple of days, it gets to a rhythm to it, because you're loading, you're unloading, you're setting up, you're tearing down. Pumping water is always part of your day as well, because you use it for all your meals, and typically if you have dehydrated stuff. So yeah, it's fun. They say a week is great, 2 weeks is better, 3 weeks is awesome, because you really start to put everything at home behind you and just really get into the enjoyment of being in the outdoors. So yeah, if you can do more than a week, I highly encourage it. It's a lot of fun. So day 2 here, Mosquito Beach to Chapel Beach. So this is another feature. This is this Chapel Rock, and you can see how this carved out there, and there's this lone tree just hanging out there. And you can see that from shore, but you can also see it from the water as well. And it's kind of cool, the back side of it, there's roots that go to the mainland that kind of span, you know, that are, I guess, servicing this tree. The rock has fallen away, and it's still connected to the mainland. Yeah, you can see right, yeah, you can see right there. Look at this root system kind of goes over that tree, and that thing is still thriving. I mean, look at that, it's crazy. So yeah, and this is a little Chapel Rock there. And then there's a little creek there that comes out at Chapel Beach. So yeah, it's pretty cool, the sights you get from the water. You get to see this, you kind of see it from land a little bit, but it's neat to see it from the water. So as you're working way along there in a lot of these creeks, things, you know, there's waterfalls at multiple locations along Pictured Rocks. This is probably one of the most famous, called Spray Falls. So, you know, just like when you see a big rock in a hole in the wall and you want to jump out of it, you see a waterfall, you got to, you know, paddle underneath there too, right? So we took turns kind of, you know, it was bath day, right? So, yeah, paddle right underneath the waterfall there. So a little rainy. It was kind of low. I've seen this really roaring where you wouldn't want to paddle underneath of it, but luckily it was, you know, more of a drizzle than a downpour. But it's still pretty cool paddling underneath the waterfall. And then there also was a little cave back in here too. So there's another shot of Spray Falls kind of going through it. So yeah, so Spray Falls, and then just past us is just the shoreline. I mean, look at the steep rocks, and you can see the different layers. And you know, I was looking at it a little bit. There's, you know, pre-Cambrian, and, you know, you get into the geological kind of stuff and what holds it together. And it's, you know, again, I wish I was more of a geologist than what I am, but it's just, again, appreciating the natural wonders that are there. So this is another feature called Lover's Leap, and so it's a big sea arch you can go through. There's another arch that's called the Grand Portal, and the Grand Portal was similar to this, and they actually used to go boats through it, but the roof of the arch fell, and you can't go through it anymore. But it's pretty cool seeing something like that. You can see right through that. And there's some Native American lore of a warrior princess waiting for her warrior to come back from some battle, and he didn't, and she, you know, leapt off this thing. So there's actually a book of Grand Island Chippewas that I bought that gives you all kinds of Native American history of the area, which is very interesting. Just got that. So just more shoreline. Again, it kind of blends together after a while, but it still is spectacular. And, you know, I like trips where there's nature right to the edge. You know, I've done trips like, you know, Isle Royale, and there's places in Canada too where it's tree line, boom, right to the water, and it's just cool. I mean, it's nature. More coastline there, plugging along. So caves, and more caves. I mean, you just paddle along, and there'll be this huge rock formation that you can paddle back into and disappear. And like there goes your buddy, and you're like, yeah, I'll go in after him. What the heck? Let's go. So yeah, and again, if it was rough, you wouldn't want to do this. But luckily, we had some good weather that you could, you know, you're able to do that. So here's a cave that we can go into, and you can see it's big enough that you could turn all the way around, and then this actually connected to another cave on the other side. So it was a little diamond-shaped thing there. We could just squeeze through it to get onto the other side of that. But again, you know, the pressure and time has created all these different rock features and caves and whatnot. So, I mean, it's almost too many to count. So we got to Chapel Beach, and so we wanted to do another hike. You know, again, we're not solely just doing the kayaking thing. So we did this pretty long, it's maybe a 10-mile hike where you hike to the falls, and you go around Chapel Lake as well. And again, this is more typical trail hiking there. And then there's Chapel Falls, and then here's the lip of Chapel Falls. We were able to just kind of cross right over the lip and pick up on the trail, which is kind of cool because I haven't been on the lips of very many waterfalls. It was kind of fun to be able to do that. So yeah, there's plenty to see to do even when you make your base camp and you're able to connect to these trails and see some of the other things there that are along Pictured Rocks. And then this is Chapel Lake. And it was cool because look how calm it is. And I kind of like you get the mirror image here where there's the trees, and then it's reversed in the calmness of the lake. But that's the lake that fed that waterfall. So able to stretch the legs a little bit. So Chapel Beach, along there, it was the time of the year that you had blueberries, and we had blueberries at nearly all of our campsites. I mean, look at these things. I mean, these are wild, yeah, my little pointer thing. But those blueberries were plump, delicious, and they would taste like candy. So we had oatmeal in the morning, and we threw some fresh blueberries into the oatmeal there, which is, it's always good. You go to some place like Isle Royal, and you have thimbleberries. You ever heard of thimbleberries? They are spectacular. It's like a cross between a strawberry and a raspberry, and just gloriousness. It's awesome. But wild blueberries are fantastic. Anytime we can get them, we can get them. So this is our Chapel Beach camp. It kind of shows you the type of campsites that you have along there, and more the trail that connects everything along there. I must not have taken a picture of the setup on this one, but it was a good campsite, nice and flat because we were tenting at the time. So again, morning we had some rough conditions. Things kind of build throughout the day. Sometimes it would level, sometimes it wouldn't. But getting out past the breakers is always the hardest part of the trip, trying to get off the beach. So yeah, Chapel Beach. So we were at the furthest spot that we were on Pictured Rocks. So the way our itinerary was set up, we were kind of like out of campsites. So we wanted to incorporate Grand Island. So we were at the far end. So we had, just to get back to Grand Island, had about a 15-mile paddle, and then we had to go around the end of Grand Island to get to Murray Bay. And so you're probably pushing 18 miles of pretty rough conditions. And so we knew we had a long day. And I don't have a lot of pictures because we had extremely rough seas. And at one point in time, the tour boats weren't out, there weren't any other kayaks, there was nothing. We had gray skies, and a sailboat under power, not a sail, under power, came crossing by us. And it went by us. The guy's looking at us going, "What are you doing?" And we're like, And I remember there's a couple of breakers along there where I got turned sideways, and I was surfing sideways down the face of a wave as we were kind of making our way back to Grand Island and Murray Bay. So it was a rough day. There's some of these, I don't have a lot of pictures because you didn't really want to take your hand off your paddle. You were bracing and doing some things to keep you from going upside down. But it wasn't entirely a long paddle, but it was a rough paddle. It was a long way of dealing with some pretty rough seas. There you can see coming off the beach there. I think that might be Kelly right there. That's Kelly. That's Liz's paddle, so you can't even see him. He's trying to get off the beach. So I even put a little thing here: wind, northwest, tough paddle. Kind of wrote it in the sand. Yeah.
How long did it take you to go the 18 miles?
So that day we did have some wind. We had a push, but it was coming out of the kind of the north because it was kind of getting beamed a little bit. So it probably took us, probably 5 hours, probably 4 or 5 hours. We were scooting along there, but you kind of had a wind that's kind of quartering you off your tail there, so it was kind of wanting to. So you're constantly having to edge and kind of. A following sea is kind of harder sometimes than having a headwind because you kind of see what you're doing. When it's kind of pushing your butt around, you're like, I got to work extra hard because I have to edge my boat and I have to sweep stroke to kind of keep my boat going where I want it to go. So it was a physically tiring paddle. I've paddled longer longer distances at a given time, but there wasn't a whole lot of gliding on that one. It was like we knew where we had to get to, and you're up against dark at that point. That's the only thing that you're up against. So we're going back to Grand Island at this point. So Chapel Beach to Murray Bay. So there's just some more, sea arches and caves that we saw along the way as we're going. And then this is the Grand Portal right here. So there's the Grand Portal. Now you can see where the ceiling of it had caved in, and there's up close. You can't see, but at one point in time, I guess you could paddle through there. So, and again, I like looking. You look, it was like, yeah. But you look here, but then you can look in the distance in some of those pictures too, and you just see, the coves and everything that keep going on and on and on. All right. So I point this. So we went from Chapel Beach to Murray Bay, and so that's my buddy Lee, and he's doing this. He's all happy. So have you ever heard the term bonking? Endurance athletes. So you have used every ounce of energy. Like he had whatever granola bar he ate in the morning and whatever cup of coffee he had, he burned through that in no time. So we made it to, so you went around Grand Island, you go on the far side of Grand Island to come into Murray Bay. So by the time we made it around this point right here, so you can see the 2 points that make up the bay. This is on the south, this is the north. We made it to that point right there, and Lee was like, I have got to get out of this boat. He had burned through every ounce of breakfast that he had. He was dehydrated, he was tired, I mean, it was a rough paddle. And so we sat right there on the tip of that little spit right there, and we were like, our campsite's right there. It's right, he's like, I can't move. And he was cramping up, and he was having a hard time. So he laid on the beach, and I had a hunk of summer sausage that I was just taking pieces of, and I was like literally just feeding him to him. Like, had a hunk of cheese. He's just like, he just needed something to get, a little bit of energy. Because, I mean, you're burning a lot of calories on a trip like this. I mean, you're not just paddling. When you paddle a boat like this, you're working underneath the deck as well. You've got your legs, you're moving, you're using your hips, you're using your core. You're burning a lot of calories when you do this. So we probably sat there for an hour and a half as he kind of recovered. And then when he hit shoreline, he was like, "Thank you, Jesus! We're finally there." But yeah, that's one of those things that I had never seen anybody ever just totally like bonk out before. It was like he was like, "I got to get out of this boat. I'm done." It was a long day. It was a long day. So again, there's just more of this. So it's kind of neat because you are kind of you're kind of back in this cove on Grand Island, so you can kind of see the points to point there, and you can kind of see the wind wrapping around, so it wasn't entirely a calm day. So this is the next morning. Things have kind of calmed down. This is where our boats were, and then it was just a short little walk over to our campsite on Murray Bay. And so campsites there were first come, first serve. It was great. And so dotting along the bay here, there's 3 or 4 campsites that we just, boom, we landed, and we were right there where we needed to camp, and it was pretty cool. It was a neat experience. And so there's our camp set up. They throw in a picnic table for you. And then they got the little bear posting sign there, right where our food is. There's the bear posting. There's me kind of relaxing there in a bear burrito. But there's a pretty active bear population on Grand Island. It's big. Grand Island is 20 miles long. I mean, it's a long, north to south is a long, probably by 8 or 9 miles wide. So there's a lot of surface area there, and it's not very far from the mainland. So if it does ice over, the bears can go back and forth, and it's really not that far for them to swim as well. So we kind of had a fun little campsite there. And then we didn't have a bear pole. We had a bear box. So he had a box there, so apparently the lack of thumbs or whatever, I guess, is what keeps bears from getting in your stuff. But this is kind of fun here that I discovered popcorn on a camping trip. I know it's kind of dumb, but I think Kelly brought some little bag of popcorn, some oil, and we were making pot after pot of popcorn right next to the bear box at our campsite. I'm like, nothing is more aromatic than a bowl of popcorn in the still forested air at a campsite. So at that point, we threw caution to the wind, and we just figured, what the heck, we're here. But yeah, all of our food and everything, it's got the little, I'm sure somewhere on this little sheet here it probably says, "Do not pop popcorn at your campsite." But again, we survived. Yeah.
Excuse me, what's the cabinet for?
Say what?
What's the cabinet for?
That's where you put your food. So yeah, it's got a special lock on it.
Okay.
So instead of hanging it from a tree, you throw it in there, and you lock it up. So a little bear locker. So we were at Murray Bay, and so our very first night we camped at Trout Bay, and it's really not that far. I wish I had the map. I mean, it's so skinny between the 2 bays that we hiked over to Trout Bay just for something to do, just to kind of stretch the legs, and it was a really cool. You can kind of go up on the bench on the kind of would be the northeast side of Trout Bay, and you kind of look back on where we came from. That's why I like this. And again, you can kind of see the distance of Pictured Rocks, and then. I like to capture the full trip experience as well, and I've been some places where they did have a little privy, a little thunderbox here, and so it's a loo with a view. So it's like I'm in the woods, doing your thing, you're kind of looking out. So I'm like, no secrets here. We capture everything on the trip. So there's actually another. If you go. Bruce Peninsula, Canada, Tobermory, there's a flower pot island, and again, it's got a privy like this, and it says a loo with a view, a little French thing going, and you're looking out onto the lake as you're kind of doing your thing, and it was kind of neat.
The
Yeah.
other side.
No. I got the forward-facing view there. So we did a little hike over there. So now we're working our way up from Murray Bay up to the north side of Grand Island to a place called North Beach. And we woke up in the morning and we thought this was pretty cool. So you see that right there? That is a Coast Guard vessel called the Katmai Bay. And it's a buoy tender icebreaker up in that region. And they must have come in overnight and anchored. And we woke up in the morning having our coffee, and there's this really cool Coast Guard ship kind of anchored out in the harbor. And then Munising is you can just see Munising on the mainland right there. And they had little Zodiac boats, and they were running, sailors into town for something. But it was just one of those like cool up north UP, Great Lakes kind of thing. And if you go to there's actually a website for the Katmai Bay, and it's got all the history, and you can follow the travels where it goes all over the place. And I think I did see it in Detroit one time too. I had to come down to Detroit for something, and I saw it there, but it was pretty cool. So of course, we paddled out to it, and that's a serious boat. I mean, that's up there plying the waters and keeping channels open and dropping buoys and whatever they got to do to maintain that part of it. But it was kind of cool to go out to it. And you can see there's Lee sitting there kind of, getting his gear packed, and there's the ship right there. A little bit more on a boat. I think it officially is a ship. So we started working our way up the west side of Grand Island, and there is a ferry, quote-unquote ferry, that goes from the mainland over. So there are some logging trails on Grand Island that you can hike. I mean, you can hike and camp there. There is a couple of grandfathered residences on Trout Bay. So there are some little cabins that are grandfathered for families. And then there is the North Light is actually a lighthouse I got some pictures of too, that there's a family that now owns that and uses it as a summer place. But there's the dock to get over there. So there's actually a pontoon boat. There's a boat ramp on the mainland side, and there's a little pontoon boat that takes people over there. But there's not a whole lot going on. There's a little visitor center, just a little kind of ramshackle dock, a little pontoon boat that goes back and forth. It's not like taking the ferry over to Put-in Bay if you've ever done that. But once you get over there, there's not a whole lot over there. I know they do some running races up there. I think they might do a little bit of mountain biking as well. But it gets pretty steep when you get that north end. The hills really climb on this, and you get those 200-foot cliffs. Yeah, they're coming to and from the island. There's not a whole lot there. So the morning we left Murray Bay to go out to North Beach, we did bump into a ranger. And the ranger says, "Hey, have you guys been here before?" And we said, "No, we haven't. We're kind of exploring." And you try to do some research on all these trips and find out, what do the locals know, kind of thing. And she's like, "When you get to North Beach, you got to find the moon rocks." We're like, "Moon rocks?" We're like, "What's that?" It's like, you'll know them when you see them. We're like, "All right, cool. Right? We'll look for some moon rocks then." So we had about 20 miles of paddling to get up to North Beach, and just like Pictured Rocks, again, I'd argue Grand Island is almost as spectacular as Pictured Rocks. You have this amazing shoreline, these layers of geological type things. You have little waterfalls coming off and creeks. I mean, the island's big enough to have a water system and creeks and rivers and lakes and whatnot. So yeah, you're paddling along there, and you get the Pictured Rocks experience with like kind of more of the tourism type stuff is back at Pictured Rocks. So yeah, we kind of worked our way along there. Now you look at this. I mean, look at these sandstone features that are all dotted along there. Again, cave after cave. This is right around the corner, and you can poke back in there. And this picture on the end here is looking up. So it's just like this. You're looking up into this kind of cathedral of a cave that is carved up into the side of the island. Again, with the different colors and everything. So yeah, I mean, you can spend hours and hours and hours just poking into every tiny little crevice and cave and everything. And again, I get to do that from the water, where if you're hiking, you get to see some of that stuff. So here's another cave we ducked into, and again, you could get, there's two of us in there, and the third one coming in. You kind of go back in here. You kind of see how the cave kind of drops back in. But again, you're just, it's just fun. I mean, if the weather's right and there's not enough, not too many wind and wave type things, wave action, you can do it safely. It's kind of fun to explore. Yeah. So another sea arch there, and then this one's kind of cool. It's just this real low little bench, but look at all these little legs of this thing. You can kind of go in and out of those, and it's like, eventually that'll probably crumble and fall into the lake, but for the time being, it's kind of cool to kind of poke around and check it out. So this is Lee. Where'd he go? I lose my little thing. Yeah, so Lee, he's got this boat here, and this is a boat. It's a manufacturer called Sea Kayaking UK. It's a British-made boat, and it's based off of a Greenland-style boat. And this little, see that little, yeah. Well, the tail of the boat on the stern, we call it the little elf toe. It sticks up there. So back in the indigenous, the Inuit people that started kayaking, they made kayaks out of sealskin and sinew and driftwood and whatever they can find on the beach. And they're hunter-gatherers, so they're hunting seals, right? So the design of this boat, even though the elf toe has no purpose other than just kind of being a little weird and kind of cool, but back in the Inuit people, that was a fulcrum. So what they could do is they could pull the sinew up tight on that fulcrum to add more rocker to the boat. So if they're hunting and there was rough seas, that would be the fulcrum, so they could have a rough water boat. Or if the seas had laid down, they could loosen it off that fulcrum point, and it would lay the ends of the boat down and make it for a flatter, longer waterline boat for more long distance, more calm seas. So it's kind of a fiberglass tip of the hat to kayak design. So I followed Lee around 4 or 5 trips with this boat, and I fell in love with it, and I actually bought one myself. So I own that boat as well. So it's kind of cool. So you get a little history there. Again, another cave looking out. I'm trying to think of the island. It's kind of Beaver Island might have been off of Grand Island. There's another island off of it. And the thing I liked about Grand Island is, as you're going up the shoreline, it's forest right down to the water. And no cottages, no people, no nothing. There's probably bears back in the woods, but there's nothing there other than trees. So we're kind of working our way along the shoreline up North Beach. So we get around North Beach, and it just like kind of Murray Bay, kind of has a big cove kind of thing. There's like a point on each end of it, and we start working our way along the shoreline of the tall cliffs of North Bay or North Beach, and all of a sudden we wander upon these things and these potholes, and we're like, got to be moon rocks, right? Looks like a moon rock to me, right? Yeah, so we, you get the low sandstone kind of bench there, and you can see where it goes into deeper water. But just like a mortar and pestle, over the time, stones and pebbles and rocks and everything get, kind of wound in there with the wave action, and they have carved these like tubes straight down into the sandstone. And each one of these was 9-10 feet deep, probably a little bit deeper. We're probably waist deep in the water where we're standing, but you could dive down into it. And I'm over 6 foot, and you were at the bottom of this thing kind of looking up. But these were kind of punched into the shoreline all along that North Beach area on the west side of the cove there. And it was cool. I mean, we just stood there and played around and swam. And again, it was a bunch of 30-year-old guys just having a good old time, swimming in Lake Superior, But it's pretty cool. Some of them connected together, and you can go underwater and kind of go over to them. Like this picture of Lee, he's at the bottom swimming up. I had kept a pair of like swim goggles with me that I took on the trip too, so it was kind of fun to be able to look at it. You can kind of see at the bottom of this one, you kind of see the stones and everything in there that eventually just sort of kind of ramble around and carve these things out. I was reading the one book on the people, the natives of the Grand Island region up there, and I guess back in the day they would have some shallow of these potholes, and they would heat rocks and put them in there and use it as like kind of a stew pot, and they would put fish and everything in there. So the ones that were not as deep, kind of shallow, they would heat rocks in the fire, and they would actually use them to cook out of. So that's the moon rocks. So those moon rocks were kind of along this shoreline over here. So now we're at North Beach, and North Beach was just spectacular. I mean, the sand was like Caribbean, white, beautiful sand, and nobody was around. It was awesome. We were as far away from Pictured Rocks as you can be. You're on the far end of Grand Island, and there was a lighthouse just up there that I got some pictures of. So it's got the North Light. But it was just a fantastic wild place to hang out with a beautiful sand beach. And we came in here, and so this is where I'm standing. That's looking to the left, and then looking to the right is the other end of North Beach, and you can see where the cliffs take off again. And then there's actually another river that came out there, so I'm guessing that probably deposited most of the sand out there. But yeah, the North Beach was a pretty amazing place to kind of hang out and camp. So here's the little trail that went up to our campsite. There's the kind of the creek or the river that came out there. That was kind of cool. And it was just a magical, neat place to kind of hang out, and nobody else was around.
Is the water
Yep.
that clear all the way around?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, it doesn't get stirred up around here. There's a lot of muck and mud thing around here. Water is extremely clear. I mean, you're looking, you can see, 100 feet down, you can pick every stone off the bottom. But yeah, it's a spectacular. Lake Superior, Lake Erie, kind of two different, water quality kind of things. But this is a great place to camp there. But the campsite kind of stunk. It was tucked back into the trees and kind of, we didn't have the view we were looking for, but they needed to keep you off the water. So we're kind of tucked back in here in the trees, and again, there's a flat spot to put your tent, but all the cool stuff was out on the beach side of things. Again, we had to hang our food, and I think Lee's there waiting for it to fall on his head. He's looking at it, but yeah, North Beach was a little remote, so we're like, I don't know. I don't know how often they see humans, so the smell of food, we were a little scared of bears on that one. So then we went for a little hike, and so there's kind of like logging trails that kind of go around the island in its logging days, and it's kind of single track and double track and kind of walk around the island. But you can see the sheer cliff faces and everything here are just as spectacular as Pictured Rocks. It was awesome. So there's the lighthouse, the North Beach light, and a little cottage, and the actual light itself there. There was nobody around when we were there. We kind of, hello, anybody around? Nobody's around, but we, went up, took a couple pictures, but somebody's got that restored, which is kind of neat. But I know it was there. So doing a little yoga on a cliff. Again, it's a cliff. Let's do some yoga. What the heck? Why not? And then this picture here was the sunset, nighttime, sitting on the beach. And so as you're going throughout the trip, you try to stay clean. You usually take a dip, and you have some biodegradable soap and some things. Kind of, sometimes you shave, sometimes you don't. Kind of want to stay clean. So it was getting close to dusk, and I think Lee was at that far end, getting cleaned up, and I was here, and I'm washing my hair. So all of a sudden I hear wah, and Kelly comes running by me at 100 miles an hour, naked as a jaybird, and he just goes wah. He comes running by down the one end of the beach. And I'm like, that's interesting. And all of a sudden he gets down, he spins around, he comes flying by me again, and he's like, I'm doing it because I can. I was a 50-year-old dude running naked on a beach. I still laugh. Silver hair, just flying by me on the beach, just running because I can. So yeah, it was one of those sticks out in my memory, and it was kind of fun. Yeah, because I can. I mean, how often do you get a beach to yourself, right? So yeah, you asked about the water clarity. There's one of the beaches that we landed. And you look at it, how clear it is. We didn't quite, scoop it up and drink. We still purified our water. I get pumps, but it felt like you could. It was pretty darn clean. And then just some more caves and things that you poke along there. Again, amazing shorelines. So we came down the far, another 20 miles down along the east side of Grand Island, and there's a really cool campsite here on the channel. So the channel between the mainland, Pictured Rocks, and Grand Island is called the East Channel. And so there's kind of not a well-known campsite that we can land at and kind of hang out there and kind of set up for our last trip. It was only a couple miles back to Sand Point. So there was a nice beach and a little rock there, kind of hanging out, and kind of sad the trip is kind of getting ready to come to an end. If you go along the East Channel, there's a kind of historic East Channel light there. They've done a lot of work to help restore that. So you get to see another lighthouse there. And then we kind of hung out on this little rock that Lee's sitting on there, and kind of had our dinner. Kind of sat there and ate, cooked our food. This came out, I thought this was kind of neat. Where our campsite was, it was up on the top of the little bench there. And there's just this little creek that came down right by our campsite. Just was a little trickle of water. And then we had this really cool little rock formation kind of thing there. You can see all the layers of limestone. But again, it's just neat stuff that you don't see all the time. I don't take a lot of pictures of flowers. I take pictures of things that interest me. So, but I thought this little creek was kind of cool. So this is when we hiked back over to Trout Bay. you know, we kind of can go up above Trout Bay. I mean, just looking back at Pictured Rocks, I just thought, you know, this shot is just awesome. You know, you're just looking into the distance and you see the Pictured Rocks and the cliffs and everything. I thought it was pretty cool. And then another Trout Bay one, the clouds a little bit different lighting, but again, it's 15 miles of that is what you see, and that's what we paddled. You know, point to point across all those peaks and everything that we paddled along there. So you asked about the hammocking. So that the last beach that we're at, there was a tree that sort of, I don't know if it fell over or was kind of growing out of the side of the hill there where we were camped. And I was kind of looking at that going, I think I'm going to sleep in my hammock tonight. And so I had my sleeping bag and my hammock, and I was just, this branch was sticking out, you know, horizontal short. I just kind of hung my hammock underneath of it, and you know, that was sunlight the next morning when I woke up, and I thought, this is fantastic. I'm waking up, and you know, my memory's a little sketchy. There might have been an eagle that flew by there too, maybe. I don't know. You know, I was thinking, hear the scream there. But I got to see the sunlight, and as I woke up in the morning, did the stretch, and I'm like, this is pretty awesome. So that kind of sparked my interest in hammock camping. But it's a lot of fun. It's chilly though. When you camp in a hammock, even in the summertime, because whatever your insulation is, you're sitting on it, or you just have a real thin layer of the material of the hammock, and your butt will get cold. And so there's a thing called an underquilt that will hang underneath your hammock. So you see a hammock underneath your hammock that will trap your body heat. And that's a game changer if you ever get into hammock camping type stuff. So you have a underquilt, and then you have a top quilt, which is essentially a sleeping bag without the zippers and the hood and everything. And so you're kind of layered between a couple different layers of typically down. And it is, for me, it's extremely comfortable. But again, you can get into a whole black hole of gear kind of thing when you get into the hammock camping thing. So that was kind of a nice way to kind of wrap up the trip there. And then so we only had a couple miles to go, get back to Sandpoint as we paddle around the corner. And there's the three amigos just getting ready to head home to go back to the families and responsibility and all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, we did a nice 6-day trip along Pictured Rocks. You could stretch it out longer if you'd like, but it's a wild and fun place to go in our wonderful Great Lakes, and it's not that far of a drive to get to from here. And if you have the right gear and skills, I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So I always bring some gear along. Usually I get a lot of questions about gear and where to start, what do I do, what do I need kind of thing. So I always bring some gear. Typically get some questions about the trip itself. Any questions? Any questions at all? Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Well, you call that a sea kayak. Mm-hmm. Is it because sea because it's way longer?
Well, I mean, its origins are ocean based. So even though we're the inland seas here, the Great Lakes, it still references a sea kayak. Typically,
you need that length to go on the higher.
Not necessarily. So a sea kayak is typically something that's over 15 feet, 14, 15 feet. Below that, you start to get into what would be considered more of a recreational kayak. There's some different hull design features that you get with a boat that's a little bit longer. And you start getting into some of the efficiency things and the glide that a longer boat provides for you over distance. So we usually don't call it flat water, we call it open water. This boat, from a safety perspective, while this is storage for your gear, there's what's called a bulkhead right here, where at the end of your feet. So inside this boat, there's a wall. So this front part and the rear part where you share the hatches, when you put the hatch covers on, is flotation. So if this boat would happen to go upside down, even though I may come out of the boat, this boat will float. And so there's a bulkhead here forward, so you have probably 70 gallons of volume of air that'll keep this boat upright. Some of the recreational boats that you see out there don't have bulkheads. So if you have a cockpit that has 80 gallons of volume and you go upside down, well, what's a pound of water weigh? 8 pounds, right? 80 times 8, 640 pounds of water that you were trying to lug and try to right to get back into your boat. So from a instructor safety perspective, I always advocate for boats that have multiple bulkheads. That it does allow for self-rescue. If you can't roll a boat, there's skills to be able to roll the boat. There are skills to be able to get back into the boat from a self-rescue or assisted rescue standpoint, that these bulkheads will allow you to get back in. You'll have some water in the cockpit, but this thing won't go underwater and go away. So, yeah, go ahead.
So is this thermoform or is this fiberglass?
This one's fiberglass. So you mentioned thermoform is, so you get boats that are polypropylene, plastic boats. Thermoform is another design of a boat, which is basically 2 ABS plastic sheets, like ABS plastic pipes for your plumbing, is basically ABS that are formed into molds and then are connected together, the hull and the deck. The boat that you see in the presentation, that was a thermoform boat. So I used to own an Eddy line. So I sold that, and this is actually a fiberglass boat. So there's awesome boats on both standpoints. As you kind of move up in skill and ability level, a fiberglass boat, the resistance to bending, any forward stroke that you're doing in a fiberglass boat is the power is going forward. A poly boat can flex a little, so there's a little loss of power, but there's also very good poly boats. I've got a poly sea kayak that's 18 feet long. It's a very good boat as well. But there's some performance characteristics a little bit different. So yeah, this one is fiberglass. Yeah. Yeah.
So you talked about safety. Did you bring a cell phone, marine radio, or any of those?
Yep. So on this trip, we didn't have a spot or anything like that. We weren't so remote that we felt we needed that. We did carry VHF radios. I've got my PFD here. So PFD or a VHF works better, line of sight. So in the coastal situations, it wasn't like we were in mountains, but I carry a VHF radio that you're able to monitor Coast Guard channels. You're able to hail if you need assistance or help. You can even call between groups of kayakers itself. So everything I've got is tethered. So I do have a VHF radio. We did have bear spray. We had that as well. We carried Kelly's a big bear spray proponent, so he had a holster anytime we were hiking around. So we did have bear spray. But good sense and good planning and good everything goes into having a safety on the river as well, or on the lake.
Do any outfitters out there run a trip for a never-ever kind of person or boat?
Well, I know there's a lot of day trips. There are a lot of day trip paddlers up there. The overnight stuff, I can't speak to that. I know a couple of the guides up there, but they pretty much do day trips out and back. And there are some that will take you out on a boat and you launch from a boat as well versus launching from shore. So you can do some kayaking out there. I know a lot of the tour groups that are going there will do a double kayak. They won't do a single kayak like this. They'll put paddlers in a double kayak. So, yeah. Hey, go ahead.
I know the waves can get pretty high up there in the Great Lakes. How high waves can you do with that kayak?
Well, I mean, if I'm touring, if I'm trying to get from point A to point B, like, oh man, there's some big waves. I also go out and play. I have friends that call me and like, hey, there's small craft advisory conditions. Let's go out. And I'm like, I'm there. So, too much can be too much. So it's kind of funny. So if you're sitting in a kayak, if you're sitting there from basically your waist to here is what, 3 feet? And I feel, oh, we were out in 8-foot waves. That means that wave was 3 times as tall as from here. That's not an 8-foot wave. So there's rollers, there's breakers at the shore. It's not like, plunging surf obviously is something you don't want to be in, but we were on a trip along the Puckasaw coast in Lake Superior on the east end, and we were going over swells that were the size of shopping malls. It was ginormous. The wind, we had a headwind the entire way, and it didn't look like we were moving. But this massive wall of water was hundreds of feet long, and you would go over, I'd follow somebody, and my buddy would disappear. He'd go off the back end and down the face, and then you'd paddle up the face, and then, but I'd get up to the top, I'd look left and right, and it was huge. It looked like a strip mall. It was ginormous. We were probably 20 feet in the air, But again, you have this. If you have a lot of open water and you have a lot of fetch, again, you have a lot of open. Nothing's blocking that wind, and that builds exponentially over time, over space and time. But that trip was that was another trip that I've done a presentation on. That was a difficult trip. I came back and I was beat up. That was a tough trip. But those walls, we did Mission Cotton Island. So we went from Wawa up the Puckasaw coast So northeast corner of Lake Superior. So we did about 40 miles up the coast to cross the 12-mile, well, we did a 21-mile open water crossing because of weather situations. Instead of going 10 miles up coast to go 11 miles over, we just left from that campsite and did a 21-mile straight crossing out to Michipicoten Island. So yeah, that was amazing experience. But the headwinds the entire trip. The entire trip we had headwinds, the entire way. But that wall of water was the largest wall of water I've ever seen. And you fell off the cliff, you went up, and just down the other side, and here came another one. And it's almost like being on a treadmill. It's like you thought you were trying to.
Flip over occasionally?
Yeah, occasionally. I mean, the only time I really flip over is like, hey, where's Lee? And I'm looking like this, and all of a sudden, I'm like, you get hit by a wave or whatever. But I mean, you're not really trying to. If you take a class or whatnot, I will advocate that learning how to brace in a kayak is better than learning how to roll. And a brace is basically a skill you use to not go over. So yeah, you're constantly on guard. I mean, it's they're nimble boats, but you can get kind of pushed one way or the other, and you can get a little brace and stop yourself. But yeah, it's happened to me. Usually, I'm looking at something, or I'm looking over my shoulder, or whatever. I'm like, hey, where's so and so? And I'm like, ugh, I'm not paying attention, But I have the ability to roll, so I just roll back up. Yeah.
So you did Pakistan over to Michipicoten.
Mm-hmm.
Have you gone from Wawa South going through Lake Superior?
I haven't done Lake Superior Provincial Park. That's on my short list. Yes, I've done the full length of Puckasaw, and we did Michipicoten Island, but I need to go from Wawa South. So put that on your list. So yeah, I haven't done that trip. It's cool. Yeah. So I haven't done that one. So.
What was the time of year trip of this?
We did this kind of mid-August. So a lot of times when we do our Great Lakes trips, again, the water's warmer. Blackfly season is sort of kind of gone by. Mosquitoes, and I kind of joke because I joke about being a kayaker versus a backpacker. Well, kayaking, you're typically in coastal areas, so there's typically some sort of prevailing wind. So you're not getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. I mean, I have. You take 3 steps into the woods, and they'll carry you away. But when you're in the coastal area, the wind's kind of blowing and whatnot. So at that last campsite where that rock was, we were kind of eating, we were kind of hanging out there. And I've been on trips where mosquito, I don't know where the flush was mosquitoes, but we went to Isle Royale, I was standing next to my buddy, and he had his hood on his sweatshirt pulled like this. He was getting eaten alive, and I'm standing right next to him in a t-shirt going, I don't know what your problem is, whatever you ate or whatever it was, so whatever. So we were at that campsite, and we're just eating, and the black flies found us. And I had on a neoprene kind of wetsuit kind of looking thing. That thing bit me through my neoprene, 3 millimeters of neoprene, nailed me on my shoulder. It hurt like a son of a gun. I had to go out in the water up to my neck just to get, avoid them. They were, and Lee and Kelly were laughing at me. They weren't touching him. Whatever it was that day, I was getting eaten alive. Those things nail you, and it hurts. It really hurts. Those horsefly, big black fly things. But yeah, the whole trip I didn't get touched, and I got nailed on that last beach. So.
There didn't seem to be many people up there.
That's the point. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, there really wasn't. We didn't see anybody on Grand Island. Pictured Rocks. We're time of the year, and again, this trip was a little ways ago, and it's really taken off in popularity. There's been a couple of outfitters that have really pushed the kayaking thing for people that are day travelers up there. But when we did, we really didn't see a heck of a lot of people. We really didn't. And that's kind of the beauty of going into some of the wild places that we go. Yeah.
Besides your oatmeal, what'd you eat? What'd you do to get all the calories to all the better?
So my food has evolved. When I first started, I'm like, I'd go and buy all the the mountain house type things. But I've really evolved over time, and I have things that I can make 2 or 3 things out of. If you have a whole wheat tortilla, you can do a million things with it. You can put tuna in it. You make peanut butter and jelly in it. You can take your dried eggs and put it in it. So I get things that I can It's amazing. You can go to Kroger and find pre-cooked chicken breasts and pastas and mashed potatoes that are already freeze-dried that taste wonderful. And I don't think I've bought a mountain house in the last probably 8 or 9 years of tripping. I'm able to put together, food, and I'll have, dried fruit I'll put in my oatmeal and that kind of stuff, and I'll mix it up a little bit, throw in some power bars and whatnot, but I get enough calories to do what I'm doing. But yeah, you can take a chicken breast with some dried mashed potatoes and some freeze-dried peas, and you throw it together and put in a tortilla, and all of a sudden you have a chicken mashed potato, something, But I'm very fortunate. I do a lot of trips with people that are very good cooks, and they have some extra time, so they'll cook whole meals and they'll dry. They have a little dryer thing, whatever, to be able to, to dry them. We've had some amazing Indian dishes in the backcountry. We did another trip where we took turns carrying a Dutch oven. We kind of stuck it up in the front of the boat in front of our foot pegs, and so we had shepherd's pie. It was all dried. To cook the ground beef and all that kind of stuff, and so we had a shepherd's pie kind of thing. So yeah, we do a lot of one-pot meals. And again, we all try to pitch in at dinner time. But yeah, you can get away with getting the calories and not spending $15 on a mountain house kind of thing. So yeah, you get creative. You can get creative with a lot of things. Yeah.
Do you recall what year it was that you did that trip?
What is this, 2023? This is probably 2012-ish, somewhere in there. Yeah, it's been a little while. Like I said, I've done a number of these trips. So now I went back there. So at the far end of Pictured Rocks, I mentioned is Grand Marais, Michigan. Cute little town, neat little town, and there's been a kayak symposium that's been going on there for 30 years. And so there's a kayak shop in Lansing called Power of Water, and the organization of the symposium is kind of moved around to different kayak shops, but they're the most recent one that's doing it. And it's a great experience. If you ever want to go and take some classes, the town is cool. There's a little county village campground right in town. They have a beautiful inner harbor beach that they do all the classes from. I went up there a few years after that, and I went to the symposium, and I went with a buddy of mine, and we actually went back and we did sections of Pictured Rocks as part of the classes, and actually paddled up around Grand Island. So that was maybe 4 or 5 years after that. So I've been up there a couple times doing it. But that little town of Grand Marais, Michigan is pretty cool. And the instructors that they bring in for that symposium are excellent instructors. So if it's something, if you want to get away for a little UP Northern experience, it's a great place to go to learn how to kayak. Water's cold, but it's a great place to learn how to kayak.
Your reservation fee was paid in 2008.
Oh, 2008. Okay, there we go. All right, off by a couple of years. All right. Yeah, there we go. You got my credit card number too? Oh, shoot, yeah. Social Security number, credit card number, yeah.
Yeah, Craig, I noticed too that your permit was 2008, so.
Yeah.
I did this trip with a couple friends in 2020.
Okay.
First year of COVID.
Yeah, sure.
And COVID has resulted in like an explosion in popularity in Pictured Rocks.
Yes.
I mean, it was for all the people.
Yeah.
The tour boat, there's just pods of Skittles everywhere.
Yeah, I got a guy that works for a tour company up there that their philosophy is a little bit different than some of the mass commercial ones, but it's kind of in our circle. The Pictured Rocks trip is sort of kind of, maybe do some other trips before you do that one. And I was fortunate to do it when we did it.
No, we got bolted away from these people and then we were out on our own.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, the closer to Munising you get, it's probably,
leaving for music.
Yeah, you get to the far end, it's still
All
wild.
the campgrounds are booked to capacities, but National Forest, you can, do dispersed camping, camp anywhere that you find a site.
Yeah, did you go Grand Island too?
No.
Oh, yeah.
Based on what you do, definitely want to see it.
Yeah, Grand Island is really cool. You can spend some time there. It's neat. Yeah, it's very cool.
Time to go a little further north up to Wawa. You mentioned Wawa. There's a place called Naturally Superior Adventures. Owned by David Welch. You may know David.
Yeah.
And, it's a really beautiful little lodge. It sticks out on a peninsula into Lake Superior.
Yeah.
There are 4 rooms there. You can either take your own kayaks or rent from him.
Yeah.
We'll workshop there every year for a week.
Oh, what do you want? Do you kayaking or photography?
Photography.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a great place. And there are less people.
Yeah.
I'm usually there in September, and I can hike the trails and not pass anyone all day long.
Yeah.
So, highly recommended.
Yeah, we've mentioned Puckasaw a couple of times, and that, you want to talk about wild and remote. I mean, there's nothing for 50 miles inland, that whole upper coast of Lake Superior. And we went from the Pick River back to Wawa. David helped run shuttle for us. And then we did the Bishop Cotton Island trip out of there as well. I've slept on his beach a couple times. So, but yeah, the Lake Superior trip, that's going south from there, is just on my short list. Yeah. Yeah.
How many miles did you kayak on this trip?
So you probably well, there's straight line distance, and then there's ducking in and out of everything too, so it's kind of hard. So straight line, you had at least 15 out, 15 back along Pictured Rocks, plus all the little exploring and whatnot. And then you probably had, you had 20 miles up and around, 20 miles up, 20 miles back. So, we probably did 70 miles maybe, 65, 70 miles. So, but the Puckasaw trip, that's, we did 150 miles of kayaking over 9 days. So you're getting, we used to say if you can get 10 miles in by lunchtime, you're doing pretty good. And then, beyond that, then you're like, okay, we have point A, point B, point C. If we're going to camp there, and we're like, well, if the weather's good, you make miles when you make miles, because you never know when you're going to get weathered in somewhere. So in all your trips, you always have some weather days kind of scheduled, but if you can make the distance, you can. And there's been a couple of trips, especially when we went to Isle Royal, where I'm like, man, I wish we could have had, we made some miles, but like I would have liked to stayed and explored this area a little bit. But again, it was good weather, so you kind of boogie when you can boogie.
So what's Cotton Island like on the shoreline? Not cliffs.
Well, it is. There's cliffs on the south side, but it is forest right to the beach. Yeah, it is so dense, and I've read some stuff about it. They've tried to explore, like they sent people that do like backwoods rescue to go and train there. You can't get inland. It's just unless it's the creeks and whatnot. We had weather coming and going, so we were on the island for 3 days. 3 days. We did a circumnavigation on the island, but you could spend 2 weeks exploring there. It is absolutely amazing. It's one of the last wild, great places around.
There are caribou there. Slate Islands.
Yeah, well, yeah, they've hauled a bunch of them.
Yeah.
So he's mentioned Bishop Cotton Island. If you follow the whole Isle Royal, Slate Islands, Bishop Cotton Island, they had an ice bridge, and there's a fairly healthy population of caribou on Bishop Cotton Island. 600, a herd of 600, and they're extremely friendly. It's the caribou are, but they had wolves that came over on an ice bridge and just had a field day, and they were wiping out the herd. So they actually airlifted a bunch of caribou off of Bishop Cotton Island over to the Slate Islands to help. And I guess there was a small population of caribou on the Slate Islands, but they've kind of accentuated that. And then I think they trapped, not all of it, some of the wolves from Bishop Cotton and took them to Isle Royal. So if you follow the Isle Royal wolf moose thing there, where the population of wolves were kind of, going away on Isle Royal, they're kind of inbred and kind of dying out, which they've kind of intervened and kind of put some wolves over there, and now that whole wolf moose thing is sort of kind of balancing on Isle Royal. So.
Well, thanks so much, Eric, for your time.
Yeah, thank you. If anybody has any question on the gear or anything too, come on over, touch it, feel it, check it out. You have any questions on it? Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming to this talk. Again, this is the last one in the series. So I have a little bit of an ask for you. If you know of anybody who is okay being in front of people and likes to go on really cool adventures and lives in Northwest Ohio, tell them to call me or get in contact with me. Back there are some WC Parks program guides, and you can get my contact information at wcparks.org, or there's contact information inside those program guides too. Demo day. Oh, Kayak Demo Day is coming up June 4th. So if you're like, I want to know what kind of kayak would be best for my kind of paddling, Wood County Parks will be there, Coast Guard Auxiliary will be bringing some boats, instructors of all sorts of different kinds will be there to help you get into these different kinds of boats, try them out for yourself, and begin your kayaking adventure career. So mark that down too. That date should actually be inside of that program guide.
3 Meadows Pond?
3 Meadows Pond, Perrysburg. Yep.
Yeah, that helped out last year. It was awesome. We got people that hadn't been kayaking before. They wanted to see what boat will work for me. And so the array of boats and the opportunities to test and try things out before you buy is really awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What is the upcoming event out at, down the river up by Grand Rapids?
At Seagull Park. You guys are doing something. I saw it on the calendar.
Oh, yes. So that's also in that spring oak leaf program guide. We're going to be doing a paddle prep series to kind of walk you through the different things that you should be considering when it comes to either buying a boat or when it comes to going out on a trip. That's a 3-part series. We talked about backpacking. We're doing a backpacking basics series as well. We're doing all sorts of stuff. So that program guide right there, or just head to wcparks.org and sign up for one of those programs, just like you did for this one today.
You had asked about safety and coming in and out of the boat. So these are a couple of things that I carry when I'm out on the water. It's not necessarily for me, it's for you. So if I do, or you come out of your boat, this is a pump you can put in your cockpit and be able to pump the water out of your cockpit. And then this is another safety item that we carry too. It's a paddle float. So you take the end of the paddle, and you put the paddle in here, and you actually inflate it. And it traps the paddle here, and it basically turns into a kickstand. So, and there's some skills.
Classes too, either basic kayak classes, or we'll be doing a kayak rescue class in the middle of the summer. So again, wcparks.org, programs at the top. Find out all about them.
So you blow this up, and then you're able to put this on the comb of your boat, and it basically is flotation. Like I said, it's kind of a kickstand that allows you to get back in your boat without flipping back over. So it's a safety thing that you usually, if you buy your kayak at Dick's Sporting Goods, they're not going to tell you this kind of stuff. So if you take a class, we'll show you how to use these things too. Yeah.
There's plenty of bait goods left, so